So I'm going to start with the introduction. I'm super excited about today's session. Most of you know him already, Steffen Sontheimer, one of the best German poker players out there. I actually want to ask you later about your start, because I am not actually sure that I know exactly where you came from. I believe you started with cash games and then basically just grinded your way up. Like the only person out there who just went from straight from zero to money with no bigger downswings, I believe.
Black Friday was a downswing, I can say that, but yeah,
but yeah, not the typical donking around for 2 years, losing money. Players
talking about the American story, I won a satellite to the PCA. I got second in the main event. Now I have 2 million in my bank account and decided to play 100Ks and win the next one.
Yeah, no, exactly. Not the American player story, but the reason why I'm super excited to have Steffen today is we basically got to know each other really early in our career as players, and spent a lot of time together also talking strategy. Is probably the player I learned the most from over the years, especially because he thinks very different about the game than I do, always very logic based, very strategy based, preparing everything before he gets into play. And also I think one of the strongest person I know in memory and applying logics in the game. So when we were working on our HUDs and analyzing opponents, this has been super fun in Canada back then. I remember these sessions and just working with the tools and trying to get as good as possible. And this mix of the two views on poker, of mine more exploitative and intuitive, and his just more with numbers and underlying strategy. So I'm very excited to host you today and have you here, and thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate that. And maybe you can say a bit about what you have in store for us today.
So yeah, sure. It's a pleasure to be here. And I mean, you asked me for how I grind up. I started with 53 bucks on NL2, and the only downswing was Black Friday. And then I had to start back on NL5, I guess, after Black Friday. And then like we went there smooth. I guess we met when I was just like grinding Zoom 500, talking about Canada times. So that's my background. Poker Stars and you like probably pushed me 10 times to finally play those high rollers live as well. So yeah, that's it. And yeah, now I just switch over and I will share my screen today because I prepared a little presentation. Shout out to our latest coach, Klaas, who gave me his that I could copy the style a little. That always helps. And I have no clue what they're asking me here. I'm just trying to share my screen. Let's see.
You should be able to.
Okay, so yeah, let's do that. And here we are talking about what's the topic today. It's like I want to come up with one of my favorite topics to just present, where I feel like lots of people I coached kind of had an aha moment, or if you want to call it like that. Because like the pattern of thinking is interesting for me there. And I call it building check raising ranges, deep stack. I'm a cash game player. I haven't been playing a tournament in a year, just that one thing that I got in for free, I gotta admit. And well, it took me 20 minutes to bust that one off. So no tournament poker today here, but whenever I do a coaching, it's all about the thought process. I don't care about like just showing you charts, learn that by heart. That's a different way of learning, which I accept and totally agree. And I had to do it myself for like shorter stacks as well. But the deeper we get, the more we want to understand the game, because it's just, yeah, the most important thing. So today we are talking about building check raising ranges deep. And the plan is to talk, I call that nut driven, because we are really like check raising with the plan of being all in at some point, or like structuring our range that way. There are other spots where we are talking more about denying equity and stuff. So I just made that little hint there. So yeah, I guess I'm good to go right away. I have no clue what this next slide will show us, because I just I didn't try it out. So I'll just do it on the go. And lucky me, I got an agenda here. And yeah, I'll just show you the ranges we'll work with today for like our one main example I'm having. Just showing that one quickly, that everyone has an idea how freaking nitty us cash game players are. But like, don't be scared, or like, don't think like, oh, what a bullshit. Because it's not like tournament ranges and defending all kinds of shit in the big blind with that big ante. It's still the same thought process, and you should still learn something from it. It's just, well, we'll apply it in my game to make sure I'm not doing too many mistakes. We'll start with a little c-bet quiz. I've heard that you guys liked that when class did that. Then we'll talk about building those check raising ranges. We'll talk about potential exploits from both sides when we are the guy in position who can c-bet, or when we are the guy who is like in the big blind defending and check raising. How to like play versus certain mistakes people are doing when c-betting. Then next we'll talk about turn continuations. Right, there will be another quiz. And in the end, I have no clue how much time we will have left, and we'll talk through some hand histories maybe. So it will be mainly me talking, but I'll try to make it a little entertaining for you as well. Please participate in there. I'll have Fedor to back me up whenever I have questions I can ask someone directly to. Maybe he nails it every single time and I look like I'm just telling stuff that is super clear, or maybe we would all love him to mess around a little. That would be more fun. And yeah, I can't tell you. So Fedor, you're ready to go?
I'm ready, let's go.
All right. So, I mean, these are the ranges we're working with today.
Wow, this is tight.
I'm playing 6-max cash game, no ante, right? So these are actually solved ranges for Zoom 500 rake. So actually rake plays a role as well. You guys, when playing, you don't have rake anymore, you paid before, so that's fine as well. But you see on the right side, the opening range, where like something like Jack 10, Queen 10 is not really in there. Deuces, 3s, 4s, 5s, like increasing frequency, but like not really there, right? I'm always looking at the borders when I try to understand ranges. Low suited connectors, not like that nice, but yeah, we're talking about like 18% here, something like that. And on the left side, we see the big blind 3-betting range, big blind defending range. Obviously, you see lots of hands that are high frequency 3-bets. So this is why all the suited broadways are missing here. The parts that people are typically missing because everyone is 3-betting too tight out of the big blind. Let's just say it that way. And you see how much all that defending range is built around the suited combinations. Because, well, we see the tight range on the right, on the left, King 10 off, folded pre-flop. I had to learn it after playing those high rollers as well, playing with ante, playing shorter, but it's not making money, unfortunately. So these are the ranges we're working with, but doesn't actually matter too much because we'll talk about the thought process. But maybe keep them in mind a little, just the borders I was just talking about. So I would just start off with
what's the open sizing? Did you say that?
Just 2.5x, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, let's just start with that. And everyone take pen and paper or your notepad on the computer. And we're talking about c-bet frequencies, right? We know the spot now. Maybe it's not a spot you are ever playing with non-ante, but you can still give it a try. You have seen the ranges. I want to just like guess those frequencies maybe. I didn't even talk about sizings. I had in my sim like small and big sizing, like 30% and 75% as options. But actually on those, that doesn't matter too much. Just like overall frequency, the order is important. There's nothing close. It's super clear which one is the highest frequency and which one the lowest. So yeah, you take your 1 minute to try and nail it down, maybe even write the frequency on the side. And then we'll listen to Fedor, whether he nails it or not. I guess that's a good plan to start with.
And if you want to, you can obviously post your list of numbers in the chat. Yeah. So if you want to have some accountability, post it in there. You can compare to others.
One more thing for you, Fedor, because that presentation is like super bugged and it does not run when I use 2 screens. I only see what you guys see right now, or actually I see less. I see just the presentation. So Fedor, you are responsible to interrupt me if there's anything in the chat. I don't see it.
Yeah, I will do. I'm the chat responsible person, so I will make sure.
Perfect. So when you feel like you're ready, you just start off with like your explanation, like starting off with the highest frequency board, etc.
This is interesting for sure. I can already say I don't find this so easy. Like, especially given the ranges, is like I very rarely play with exactly these type of ranges or even close to that. So that's super interesting.
Just keep those in mind for the low jack, those ranges, what I talked about. So we are lacking that jack 10, queen 10 type of stuff. We are lacking that deuces through to fives heavily. And then it's just, well, the opening range should be kind of the same, like in a tournament, like an 18% range, whether it's low jack for you or you open that from 9 max under the gun, I don't know. I've seen someone opening pocket threes every now and then from very early positions and hitting sets against myself. Hey, Fedor.
Frequency, bro.
Yeah, for sure randomized.
Okay. Can you just for a second show the ranges? Just flick to them for 15 seconds again so I can see again. Thanks. Just so everyone who wants to think about it again. Thanks.
Actually, I'll get a pen and a paper to write down what you're saying in case here. Because I can't write down somewhere in notes. Okay.
Okay. Wow, this is interesting.
Let's start. I mean, the number one is easy.
The highest
frequency board, yeah.
Oh, no, don't say that, please.
I mean, I feel like how I'm setting something up.
Yeah, you're definitely setting something up. So I personally, my thought process in the whole thing. So the first thing I thought about is from experience of shallower stacks and the situation where opener has a wider range. I remember that a board like these paired boards, depending obviously on which high card there is or which card is paired, pretty high frequency c-bets with a small sizing. So I would probably go, so my first thought was board 3 and board 5. I would prefer board 5 as my highest c-bet frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So
why board 5 over board 3?
I would consider that, I mean, now I thought that I would defend more 10x ratio wise than I would open. But I didn't have enough time to actually look very specifically now at the ranges. But this would have been one thing. But if you said now that King 10 is not a defend from the big blind and you're not defending it from the big blind, then I probably like that to see bet quite frequently as well. But this would have been one reason. I remember there's some spots where it's like certain paired boards where if the defender has a lot more of the paired card in his range, you don't see bet it as frequently as
right.
shorter.
Sounds good so far. Let's say, okay, those two are highest frequency. Next one.
So now if I look at the other three, one thing that I find relevant is the nut advantage on like 9-3-4. So if I don't open 3s and 4s, I don't have sets or like there's a set advantage, especially if ranges are rather tight given the opening size and the defending in the big blind with no antes, so the sets definitely make a difference so deep, in my opinion. So I would probably, if I think about these three, then I would go rank the fourth board, would c-bet that with less frequency and c-bet the second with a higher frequency than that. So this is one of the first things I look at, that is what's the like nut distribution of these three boards. Then obviously a big relevance is the high card as well, whereas 9-4-3, there's more stronger hands below the absolute nuts in the openers range, given that a lot of the defense, like a lot of the really strong hands are 3-bets, so like 9s plus basically, or 10s plus. So there's definitely going to be some part of the range I want to be c-betting with a large size. But check quite often too, so that would be my thing on the board number 4. So I would rank that quite low. Queen 6-5. Not very made up mind on that one. I would probably choose a rather high frequency on that board, but I don't have a very clear logical explanation for it. And Queen 9-3, I would also c-bet quite frequently. So if I would have to choose, then it would be 5-3, 1-2-4.
All right, sounds pretty good. I mean, lots of things. I hope just like for you guys that like all the thought processes that like Fedor was talking about are like happening in your brains right now as well. Just like we had so many words, and we will come to that.
Yeah.
We talked about like just about sets, right? About like talking about overpairs as like next best hands, right? So he nailed it down to like range part by range part. Like the pairs he was talking about, paired boards, he was talking about his experience. I guess like with a like high frequency, small sizing, I only offered 30%. Maybe a smaller sizing is even better, just like attacking villains, huge no-hit part. But we'll get to that. So you almost got it right, Fedor. The 10-10-5 is obviously better than the King 5-5, but the other three are really the way you kind of said it, right? So 10-10-5 is really just like that high card thing where you said, okay, 10x relatively is just like better than 5, like 5-5 for under the gun. And just the thing of a paired board where like nothing hits, so the guy who was like ahead before stays ahead and can make use of that. And one big thing, and we'll talk about that a little more later, is just what can happen next. Right? What can happen next? And this tells us, okay, whatever can happen next on Queen 9-3 is way better for early position than the stuff that can happen next on Queen 6-5. And 9-4-3, actually what can happen next is pretty bad as well for for under the gun. Plus the problem, he actually has kind of a nut disadvantage right here. Right? Really, that was why I was pointing out those like that set problem so clearly, right? And this just should tell you a little about like how strong reads can be, for example, right? If you know someone's RFI when playing deep stack in tournament, that should tell you already whether someone does have deuces, threes, fours, fives from like certain positions, or he might never have it, because this totally changes that kind of board. Just like those nut combinations. Okay. I hope we've seen some good answers for you guys as well, but I'm pretty sure there are some. So yeah, let's see what's next. Actually, I'm surprised every slide as well. That's a good thing. Okay, so next question for you, Fedor. We want to talk about building that check raising range before we really talk more about where all that like betting comes from. So we talked about c-betting. Now it's about building a check raising range. And actually, well, I could have asked you, but I'm a little scared that your answer is too good. So I actually answered here myself already. From like my experience when coaching people, they always tell me, okay, I ask them, how do you build your check raise range? Take me through your thought process. And they all the time say, okay, I have my value hands and I have my like bluffing hands, right? So yeah, I would just like, maybe everyone just takes a minute again to really write down for that board, what are your value hands? What are your bluffing hands? And maybe think at the same time about like, what is the problem with that pattern of thinking, right? It's like, okay, value hand is 6-5 a value hand, probably. Is ace queen a value hand to check raise with? I don't know. Pocket sixes for sure. What are the good bluffs? Obviously, we have something like 7-8. We have something like a backdoor flush draw. I don't know, right? Flush draws, open enders, gut shots, backdoors. That's like just the usual answers I'm getting asking that question. And yeah, just like take that 1 minute to really write that down, what you have in mind, what fits in there for that board, right? Queen 6-5 was one of the boards where you have seen, I just show again, that it's just like solver frequency is just 59%, and it's only a small sizing, never a big sizing allowed. And yeah, it's like one of those boards that I'm super interested in, and we will work on that a little more today because, well, Fedor said it already, he doesn't have something like no theory behind it, but he would see that with a very high frequency, which I'm sure is working well in praxis, but is actually far away from GTO. Like, I mean, 60%, I would just assume you probably bet it like 80%. And I know some people who do it for 100, which is like horrible.
I think one of the big issues is when your theory comes from experience, basically.
Yeah.
So it's because if people don't really construct proper defending ranges against this c-bet, then there's not really much incentive to find a better strategy, because with your exploitative strategy that you initially started, you already are at a very high EV spot.
Exactly.
That's what happens very often. I observe is like, oh, I queen 6-5. If I look at it in theory, I'm like, okay, it doesn't really make sense to c-bet it that high, but if I can just c-bet for a quarter pot or a third pot and people are just not check raising or check calling enough, then it seems to be one of the best exploitative strategies.
Right, but now that being said, you say like, okay, it's good to make something that we now can see, or maybe even have known before, that it's just like far away from GTO, probably, like from like a solved strategy. And we know lots of players are doing that. And there are way more board types like that we can pretty much play the same. So this is why we're talking about check raising today, right? We are in the big blind now, and we know villains are doing something wrong, and we want to know about, again, like my pattern I'm always talking about is like, we want to know what would be right to then understand what villain is doing wrong, and as the like outcome, know what the right exploit against that is. That's the goal of the session. And I hope like when the session is done, we all know how crazy we will go on queen 6-5 to take that already, to tell that already. So I guess everyone is ready, just writing down those few things. And I guess that's on the next slide. And I just wrote some hands down, right? Really where it's questionable, right? Value hands, 6s, 5s, queen 6 suited, queen 5 suited, 5-6 suited. Well, we have no 5-6 off because we are freaking nits playing cash games. You might have it. That might be something. Okay, but we don't have queen 6, queen 5 off. And for that 5-6 off, we have way more stuff that is just offsuit shit. So usually like the ratios are kind of the same. It's something like...
Also, one thing I want to jump in quickly here with is to everyone who most likely playing tournaments believes, you know, oh, I just c-bet 100% in this spot. I think it's always good to know the theory, and then like that you're able to even understand. It's like, oh, theoretically, it makes sense to just c-bet 60% here, but as an exploit against a population tendency, I'm c-betting more. I think it's always good to have that backbone of knowing where the theory is at.
So I'll ask you, I'm just talking about the value hands. Are you ever check raising ace queen here for value?
Not often, no.
Okay, what's your reasoning for that?
It's a good question. I feel...
I love sentences that start with I feel. I love it.
I mean, actually, no, I was just thinking about what I'm saying. No, I actually do check raise it. And I check raise wider than that too. And I check raise a variety of different hands that are not on the list. But I just feel that, especially in high stakes right now, that people are like c-betting turn very frequent on these type of boards. Because there's so much fold equity on turn, a lot of turns at least, or like a mix of picking up enough equity and fold equity, that I put a lot of my check raising hands in my check calling range, but ace queen I actually do check raise most frequently.
Okay. So yeah, interesting, first of all. And you said, like, obviously that list is not complete. You know that and I know that, but it's pretty much the obvious stuff I was talking about before, right? Value hands, bluff hands. I just wrote down flush draws, open enders, gut shots, and kind of king jack suited stands for the backdoors, which can be different stuff as well. And this is just always still talking about what it's the answer I always get when I ask the question about building a check raising range. So I have to assume that this kind of thought process has to be the same for lots of you people too. And now I already put it down here. Then we try to bring those two things together and say, like, okay, we need to have a ratio, like one value bet gives me so many bluffs or something like that, where I don't want to like ask even trick questions. And I could ask you in the chat now, what is your ratio there? Bluff to value. Some people would tell me 2 bluffs, 1 value, which is like, okay, from a very, very, very simplified toy game, when we check raise pot size, this is where that comes from. And there it would be right. But here we're playing with equities. And the whole problem of seeing the world like that is that you neither take into account how much equity your pocket sixes have against villain's calling range, and you don't even think about how much equity your bluffs have against villain's calling range. So it's really a spot that we need to find kind of a new idea. And now it's the time has come where I want to talk about that we talked about flop c-bet. I made that quiz, right? So Fedor was mentioning lots of the terms that we see right here. Then I just asked, like, building a check raising range, just like without even talking about it before, because, well, that would have, like, now the way I will talk about it will hopefully help you to know like what I want to aim at when it comes to check raising. And yeah, just like the one question I'm dropping is just which are the factors that tell us which player should be interested in building a pot. And I even break it down to in building a pot of a certain size. So actually what I see the whole process when, like, all the betting patterns from flop to river or even starting pre-flop is kind of a road with a goal. And one of the goals is like, the last one is like the all-in goal, right? It's like, and so I see every bet or every big bet or every check raise and every step as like a couple of meters or like one step further to that direction all in. And obviously it's a step into direction playing for half a pot, right? For half all in, like half stacks, or playing for, well, I want to build like a pot that is just a little bigger, right? Pretty much like pot controlling. And this is what I want to make you think of like, which direction do I want to go with my range in general? And yeah, just again, take a look at those terms and think about, okay, how does that influence either your bet sizing and your bet frequency? What is like your main force that tells you to build a pot, to start betting at high frequency or to check raise at high frequency? And again, Fedor, you're the man, you got to do it. So what are your main drivers? If we just say like, okay, queen 5-6, yeah, or 9-5, 9-4-3, right? You said even some terms like, okay, you have more sets or you don't have the sets, right? Do you need to deny equity a lot or whatever? Just take those words and maybe let us participate in your thoughts that just come up.
Yeah. So in this specific spot or in general?
Or you can take examples. If you take examples, take the queen 5-6 or the 9-4-3, but it's more general.
Okay, so in general, what I'm trying to visualize is the equity distribution. I don't actually think so much in, oh, there's this term or this term. Also, nut advantage, I don't count like nut combos or think in percentages. For me, it's more, I see both ranges as a curve that work against each other, kind of. So if there's a certain part, if I see the 100% hands basically for both parts, then I'm thinking of drawing a line of how they perform against each other, of how often which person has how much equity against the opponent's range, basically with how many hands or percentage of the range of that they have. And so in this specific spot, that's how I always try to then build my betting patterns according to that. So if, for example, now I see the stack size as a multiplier. So if it's very, very deep, then it's very relevant. These, let's say 5% of 100% equity hands are extremely relevant because they can be leveraged more. So I will then have to adjust more for this specific scenario because it makes up such a big part. So in this case, for example, in the Queen 5-6 scenario, where in a more short stack scenario, I maybe c-bet a bit more, or in wider ranges, I c-bet a bit more. But now in this scenario, I feel like I cannot c-bet that much because there's some leverage that the big blind has when it's deeper stacked, given the ranges that we have. So that's why my answer was like, I think it gets c-bet not so often in theory. And so that's how I always try to think about a variety of different boards. So if I think about the check raising range here as well, I'm trying to think about which hands are naturally interested in building a bigger pot, and then kind of think about which parts of which equity part basically can substitute that or can support that that incentive, and also play fine in that type of range. I'm not sure if that's
okay. I gotta stop you here.
Yeah.
Because everyone who is watching that video later again, just stop it now, go back 1 minute and listen to that again, because it was by far the best answer I've gotten in all my coaching career, right? So it's really nailing so many things down, right? He was explaining how nuts and deepness, like stack depth, how that really like depends on each other, right? You use the word like it's kind of a multiplayer. I see it the other way around, like meaning the same thing, but just as like how I understand it is like I ask myself what counts as nuts. We're like for 200 big blinds, it's probably just like top 3% counting really as nuts, and they matter. And for like 100 BB, it's like top 5%. For 50 BB, it's top 10%. And for, let's say, for 20 BB, it's pretty much top 30%. We're like, well, all of a sudden, any queen you can like see kind of as nuts. And this is where kind of a small explanation for why those like the shorter you are, the more aggressive all the stuff gets, because like on both sides, pretty much 10 or 20% of all hands count as nuts kind of, and can be, well, leveraged in a very, very small way.
Although I think it depends on the advantage of the equity, because let's say your opponent has 5% of hands that just have 100% equity, then it's not necessarily changing with how deep you are, but it more depends on how much equity, how many percentage of your hand actually have.
Yeah.
That I think is super important, that I often am not so good at, like I think it's really difficult often to say how many better hands are there that your opponent can have and how many worse hands are there that can still.
It's really about that full range distribution and planning ahead. It's not just that you can say like, okay, let's double check those ranges, take the top 5%, right? We can do that for Queen 5-6. And for under the gun, we're talking about, well, partly fives, almost all sixes, pocket queens. That's not enough though. We got to add kings, aces, ace, queen. And this is where he has advantage over the big blind. Big blind has 5, 6s, okay, queen 6, queen 5, 6, 5. It's not enough. So he got to add king, queen, queen, jack. But that's not the way we want to think, because those hands will be irrelevant when playing for really like nuts, when playing for all in. Because, well, we want to think about what will be nuts when there will be more cards, which hands will really be interesting in the end. And there we have all the draws. We will see the advantage of the big blind a little more. And yeah, what I always want to think about is really that nut. What does it mean, like those nuts? I just described, okay, don't take the top 5%, top 10%, compare them. It's not interesting right now. Right? So I would just define something like nut equity as having equity versus villain's strongest range part. So actually like that Queen 5-6 is our spot today. And if we, let's say, check raise against that, we know that, well, our equity is interesting, but villain does not pretty much have any draws. He doesn't have any 3-4, any 4-7, any like maybe low frequency 7-8, but the other way is not interesting. This is why that spot is pretty, it will be pretty black or white, just like very, very clear situations, pretty clear decisions. So I'm splitting that up a little in nut advantage right now. Really, you can decide which hands are interesting, right? Fedor, when ordering those c-bet frequencies, he even said like 9-4-3, we have no threes, we have no fours, big problem. Let's just talk about nut advantage right now. And the other part would be nut advantage over time, right? We can take that board as well. Any 5, any 6, any 7, any deuce, even any ace kind of kills it nut-wise for early position, right? Not the ace, not too much, but just knowing, okay, like pretty much half of the runouts, big blind will actually have a nut advantage. And this is something that, well, people keep waiting for that and slow play until they are at that point. But actually, well, that's something we can plan ahead. And now coming back to the board we're talking about today, Queen 5-6 rainbow. Well, under the gun, just think about which, he has like slightly nut advantage right now if we just compare top X% versus top X%. But over time, he's getting killed, right? Any deuce, any 3, any 4, any 5, any 6, any 7, any 8, any 9. And we can just imagine how early position is buking when he's forced to play 4 stacks, because then that's exactly those cards where ace queen is a pure bluff catcher. Pocket kings is a pure bluff catcher, and pocket aces is a pure bluff catcher as well, right? So, and this is, I asked you before, are you check raising ace queen there in that spot, right? We can check raise it, like not just like to build a more like balanced range, we could say, to build more of like a more linear range, to be prepared for different scenarios on the turn and not just be super polarized. Actually, well, it will happen low frequency. And this is the main reason, because it is not about what is good right now. If we think ahead and we know on average how the boards will run out, and we know which cards come how often, we can already plan to like our ace king, ace queen, how often will it be a value bet for stacks, right? How often? You need the deuce run out. And then it's like, do I rather check call against air or do something else? Like really that check raise bet for stacks, well, happens probably 20% of the time once you hit one of your 5 outs, which I would consider the ace or queen to be. And this is really something I want you to think about. It's not just nuts right now, it's mainly nut advantage over time. And the deeper we are, the more important is that. Okay, so yeah, I'll just drink a sip of water on that to let that sink in. And now we want to come back to our board and do pretty much the same thing, but not with value and bluff, just another way of thinking, because I don't want to split them up. It's not about, okay, 7-8 is a bluff, I don't care. Ace queen is a value bet, I don't care, because when we do that, we are just talking about right now. I want to know, well, I'm planning ahead. That's why I called it like nut-driven check raising ranges, really planning ahead. My advantage in the big blind is that I will have way more straights on certain runouts, and I want to leverage them, and I want to leverage them right now. And like doing that, I want to have that thought process of, okay, everything that is interesting for me when I'm taking the first step direction all in is, how likely is it that we can value bet our certain hand on the river for stacks, right? We can check raise, bet all in, right? Maybe we need some overbets, depends all on the sizings. Villain uses for a c-bet, we use for our check raise, etc. But now we can put those two things just into like one kind of linear pattern. We can sort that. So now that's just, I want you to do it again, right? We're like, in the end, we have one list of hands that are, I would call it potential check raises, and we can sort them by how likely it is that we can value bet rivers for stacks with those certain hands, right? In the very end, there could be like, actually we could keep and put our whole range in that order. But I'm just thinking about what the last hand would be. Probably some kind of, I mean, Jack 4 suited, how bad is it? Right? Jack 4 of hearts has a backdoor straight draw. But like just in theory, we can have now use that thought process to come up with kind of a list. Okay, so Fedor, on you again. I kind of make you work today. So how would you list those things? Just like you can snap it through, right? And you guys just, you can do it for yourselves. Maybe like Fedor gives you 30 seconds of an advantage and then you nail it down. I'll give you a hint. We'll start with pocket sixes. But then really think about that. Where's your order? How likely will it be to value bet river for stacks? It doesn't have to be like scientific thing, but just like your feeling.
Is that enough of a head start, guys? I mean, so my first thoughts are sixes and then fives.
Pretty good one.
Pretty good, huh? So far, so good. I'm actually not so heavy on the queen six, and the queen five more so, but also not that much on that. I'm very much like the 4-7 suited and the 7-8 suited. Obviously, open enders an advantage, especially with backdoor flush draw over just a gut shot. You're talking about playing for stacks for value, not how often you're all in, right?
No, we can value bet the river for stacks. That's the only thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe including a little how strong that value bet is, right? We could maybe value bet queen six, but it's just like probably getting like having 60% equity against the calling range at some point. So it's really about like if a value bet is better, like 7-4, you named it, like just like drawing to the stone cold nuts. That's obviously like we can include that there a little.
I mean, one thing in these scenarios, obviously you can now think about, okay, when is it a value bet? So obviously all the open enders, backdoor flush draw are kind of the same, except that there are some blockery effects in play. So it's probably a bit more likely he continues with 9x than it is likely that he continues with 3x, which is 0. So he doesn't have 3x in his continuing range. So it's just more likely that that we make certain straights, but in general, I would pick like 7-8 over something like 3-4, because I think there's also reverse implied odds in some sense, where I rather make a straight with like 4-7 than a straight with 3-4, for example, because he will probably continue. I mean, you don't really open 8-9 suited under the gun, I guess, but
low frequency,
super low frequency. But I think this is something relevant. And then as for the gut shots, I mean, I think what plays a role too is like, besides that is flushes are always obvious value bets, backdoor flushes, backdoor trips happen very rarely, so this doesn't really matter. I mean, besides that, I don't really see much of stuff that is relevant. I personally would include some more pairs, like 6x and 5x. I'm not actually sure how often that gets check raised in theory, but intuitively I would do that.
Okay, so that's pretty good. I'll just see what's next on here. So because this is something we're adding in here, I just made that list where, okay, I gave queen 6, queen 5, just like from the way I asked the question, like I just put it ahead of those open enders, but it's really something to think about. And it's so important because, well, everyone would say queen 6 suited is a super clear check raise here. But actually, if you see this first step direction all in, and you think about, you think ahead, how often can you value bet that? Well, queen 6, is it a value bet when the turn is a king? On the river for stacks, right? When villain has pocket kings and all king queen offsuit combinations. Same on an ace. Same on a 5. Same on any paired runout. It obviously sucks, right? Runouts like 7-8 or 8-9, something like that happens. So it's like, it's kind of tough. We're like 5-6, for example. is probably the same value right now, but actually has good blocking effects, right? Because villain has more ace queens, and we are blocking the sets that we are losing to a little more than with like queen 6, queen 5. So actually 5, 6 should probably be ahead of those. I'm not like convinced by my list. I just wrote it down pretty quickly. But this explanation just really shows, okay, ace queen is really, really far down there. It's like really low chance that we can value bet that on the river 4 stacks, 100 big blinds deep. And now it's really that the way you put those open-enders in order, right? That's just that, like, okay, 7-4 is clearly the best, right? 3-4, 7-8 is actually close. 3-4, you said like, okay, villain does not really have 7-8. So 3-4 for check raising, and barreling is a little better because 7s and 8s are part of villain's call and fold at some point range. But it's like kind of drawing to the nuts, but not like 100%, right? A 7, villain might have some 8-9 suited, or should have some, plus again, there could be a 7-9, 7-8 run out, just like decreases that value slightly. I really want to think like more precise about that. Instead of saying I have an open ender, it's okay. And now you said already, right? These are just hands, and I want to say we need more, right? If we just use that question, you named those already, right? Those pairs. What actually is 6-4? Right? When we think of like chances to value bet the river, or I'll take 6-3 as an example, right? Hitting a 6 makes us the freaking nuts. But hitting a 3 makes us the freaking nuts as well, because villain obviously doesn't have deuce 4 or 7-4. Right? So really that, okay, I have a pair, I can play it as a pair, but against under the gun, what is a pair of 6s worth? Nothing. Right? Villain does not even have deuces, 3s, or 4s that then might check down. So actually my pair of 6s is worth kind of nothing. And 6-3 suited can be a 5-outer to the nuts, plus a backdoor straight draw, plus a backdoor flush draw. So that brings us to like, let's say 27% to value bet the river for stacks, something like that. Sounds pretty cool, right? And that should be actually better than some of the gut shots. And obviously we can include again, hitting a 6 or hitting a 3 is not like the stone cold nuts, right? Hitting a 3 on the turn, river is an ace. Well, villain has 9 combinations of ace queen that beat us, and he has 3 combinations of sets that beat us. So it's kind of okay, not like 100% value bet when we hit our outs, but it's really important to think about what changes things, right? 6-4 suited makes a little more straights, but therefore the 2 pair is a little worse because villain might hit a straight when we hit our 2 pair, right? 6-7, same thing. But just thinking about those, super important. Next step would be, okay, not even cards that are making nuts on the turn, but something like king 7 suited, right? That can hit backdoor straight, backdoor flush, ace 7, same thing, right? Maybe it's just 10% to hit, right? How much the king is worth or the ace is worth is not like relevant for that question, but overall, obviously it's still good to hit a king or an ace. Like we're not planning to value bet those for stacks, but I mean, obviously there's value in that, another 3 outs. Or even thinking about something like, what about those top pairs, right? Queen 4, I think the chance that we will be able to value bet it on the river for stacks is higher than with ace queen, just because of the backdoor straight draw. And well, the 2 pair is actually better as well, like queen 7, because it's just not such a good card for villain. And just like thinking about that. And yeah, now we have that whole big list of hands that when we see the check raise spot like that, all kind of makes sense. Right? We are thinking about really that we are going direction all in. We are thinking about nuts. We are playing for stacks. This is where villain can get hurt. Under the guns, advantage is kings, aces, ace, queen. But once they are not nuts anymore, we're fucking him. That's the plan. Okay, so this is now my first takeaway that is super important, is just knowing what you're drawing to. And I add that exactly there, right? What I was just talking about. You're not check raising because you have bottom pair. You're check raising because you have a bottom pair with a clean 3-outer to like a 2 pair you can value bet, right? Not one that makes villain lots of offsuit straights, for example, right? Plus you have a backdoor flush draw, plus you have 3 to a straight, for example, right? So stuff like that. And really thinking about, okay, will I be able to value bet it for stacks? Again, that example, king 7 suited on queen 5-6, backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, plus, okay, the king is kind of cool. I can value bet it for, right? Instead of saying I have an overcard in those backdoors, it's just I have that part that I can value bet for stacks at some point, and the other part is like, okay, to play like a medium-sized pot. So that equity is worth something. Just like gives you way more awareness. Really give your hands the right names. Be precise with what you're having. And that will help you in-game so much. And even on like less interesting boards, I wanted to say, but like boards that look a little worse for villain, for the big blind. Let's say king 9 deuce, right? I mean, obviously 5 deuce is the way better check raise than an ace deuce because your 5 is freaking clean. Best 2-pair out in the world, right? 9-7, freaking cool check raise, maybe, if we just take that rule. And I guess now is the point where we just look at the Pio range once. I guess that's the next slide, maybe not. But here we are. So I hope you still know the list. Let's take a look back. We start with 6s and 5s, queen 6, queen 5, but actually I said, well, probably they are lower. And the other, all those open-enders we're starting with, gut shots, etc. And what we see here is exactly that list. And we came up with that one just like without using Pio at all, right? It's just, we can even think about the frequencies, right? It's not mix. The higher the hand is up in our list, the more frequent we check raise it, right? 6s and 5s were on the top. Queen 6, queen 5, somewhere there. 5-6 makes it to 100% almost. Well, but more for like, not just the, like, I mean, as well, right? The blocker effect is part of the question as well. Like, can we value bet the river, right? We block sets, we unblock ace queen, so it's just more likely. And then coming to those open-enders, 7-4, 7-8 suited, 4-3 suited, just always, right? We're coming to the gut shots, right? The more nutted they are, the higher frequency. Deuce 4 is a gut shot to the freaking nuts. 7-9, 8-9, well, is a little worse because of the blockers, but still gut shot to the nuts. Something like queen 7, well, we have a top pair, which means a 5 outer to 2-pair and trips, plus backdoor straight draw, plus backdoor flush draw, right? These are high frequency, those with a backdoor flush draw. Ace queen, we talked about that one already, super low frequency. And then, well, something like ace 4, king 4 suited, backdoor straight, backdoor flush draw, overcard. And maybe did we see like some super just backdoors like king 10 suited? Like that's not the ones we need at high frequency. But yeah, so this is like maybe hopefully the first little aha moment that we say like, okay, we came up with that list. We didn't even look at Pio. We just used logic with understanding what does a check raise mean? What is our plan behind that? Where is the advantage that we are aiming at? And this is just nuts, nuts, nuts. And I say all in, all in, all in. And well, that leads to that. And we can do that for every board. Now, I hope I could give you right now, king 5-4, ace 6-5, jack, whatever, 7-5. And you can come up with check raise strategies. And then you can compare them. That's your first homework now. Yes, I'm giving homework. You do that. You make that list. You double check on Pio and you will see you freaking nailed it. This is what will happen. Which means, okay, now if you've learned how to set up in those spots a kind of perfect check raise strategy. And well, the worse the hand is kind of to check raise, the lower the frequency is. But now, next we want to talk about is exploits. So what we see here is most importantly to me that it's just, this is the freaking baseline. Right? We talked about that before. 3 steps. First, we want to know what would be right. This is what I consider to be right against the right frequencies, against the right c-bet frequency. Second is, what is villain doing wrong? Third, what is the right exploit? And we can obviously talk about that if we are playing against Fedor, who just told everyone that he's c-betting too wide on that board. I mean, what are we doing when we are check raising, right? I don't, like, our goal is not to get up to that freaking frequency of 19% in that spot. Our goal is to know that baseline, to then decide whether we find a reason to stay tighter than that. We won't find one, by the way. And, or we find a reason to even go crazier than that. Going crazier can mean 2 things, just increasing some frequencies here, or to add new hands. So it's really this is why it's important for me that there is no end to that list, right? To that list we can write down, there is no end. In the end, there might be pocket deuces, and it's a freaking 2-outer to a set, right? Actually, it has a backdoor straight as well. So it's like, it's not like it's impossible to check raise that in theory. So yeah, let's talk about those exploits. That's just what I said. This was the baseline.
What's the c-betting size?
30%.
Okay.
Big one is like 6% in Pio with like some kings, but I'm pretty sure if I keep it running a little longer, that will furtherly decrease. So I'm just like expecting that lower bet size, which brings us to the exploits, because, well, the low bet size is the only thing we can do in theory, because big blind has so much incentive to start building a pot. The big blind has that nut advantage over time. So he should work more on building a pot, which always tells you as like being the c-better, there's no reason. But now we all have kind of the same read that probably people are not check raising enough, right? Because they don't see this here as the baseline. They see that as the maximum, and they call their 8-6, and they call their 8-5, and they call their 7-6, and they maybe only check raise their sets half the time as well, and check raise their open-enders half the time as well. So now, question for Fedor again, and everyone can think about that. What are our potential exploits? Right, so I just wrote down some things we can think about, and I'll start off as the c-better.
Now we're talking my language.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let everyone think for a bit and think myself.
Yeah, I'm back in a second. I need some more water.
Yeah.
All right. I'm ready when you are.
Mm-hmm. Guys, I think this is a really important part. So everyone in the chat who's watching right now, for sure, think about, okay, how do you exploit in either direction? What do you do when you deviate?
And again, what I just said, be precise with that, right? There are now 10 people out there for sure that just say, do I want to say it? Yes, I can say it. Just say, okay, he doesn't check raise enough, so I can c-bet wider. Mm-hmm. That's not the answer we are looking for. So be more precise.
So just comment, like, so just posted exactly that in chat and then posted rest in peace.
Sorry, bro, not okay.
Yeah.
But Fedor will tell us the truth. I guess this one will be another one he will just nail.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but let's see. So as c-better, I mean, one of the things, now what are my assumptions? So my assumptions are, if I know the optimal strategy, then I'm assuming that, let's say we lock in the preflop ranges and we assume that's exactly his defending range, then I would assume very heavily that people are not check raising enough on this board. So they would probably not check raise enough of their strong hands, most players. And where there, I think it's not huge part missing, but I think they probably call their set sometimes, and they probably call their queen 6 and queen 5 too often, which I now learned also that plays apparently better as a check, or more often as a check raise, but I personally would debate that or consider, like, think about that. And then the bigger part is more how often they attack with hands that can make really strong hands with like on different runouts, so not advantage over time, how Steffen called it. So my first adjustment would be to basically consider, okay, if I know that, if I can, like, I think the in-position player now has an advantage in terms of considering which runout comes, right? Because there's also certain cards that favor certain parts of opponent's hand range, and some parts that don't. So let's say cards that complete more straights, especially the lower ones like a 7 or an 8 or a 3, are probably an advantage for the player out of position. And maybe a card like a king or a jack, maybe even an ace or a 10, are probably cards that favor more the in-position player. So considering that, I probably want to see more runouts with a large part of my range, especially these type of mediocre bluff catcher-ish showdown value type of hands. So yeah, I would increase my frequency to c-bet more with a small sizing, with mediocre showdown value hands that I don't really want to defend normally against the check raise. So let's say a hand like ace 10 that might be a decent bluff catcher against, you know, some of his check calls like 7-8 or 4-7 on specific runouts. Pocket jacks, pocket nines, whatever. So I want to increase my c-bet frequency with a small sizing with these hands that rather fall in my checking range. And then I probably also consider to take one part of my range that I choose a larger sizing with that actually folds out some of these hands where people are probably overfolding to large sizing. So let's say he has a hand like deuce 4 or has a hand like 7-9 or 8-9 maybe, and I choose let's say a 60 to 75% sizing with some of my, let's say a hand like jack 10-ish blocking some of his continuing hands like queen jack, queen 10 type of stuff. I actually might introduce that into my betting repertoire as well. And versus a check raise, I will be overfolding because I believe they just don't have enough bluffs in their range. And I will most likely continue with blocker type of hands, which I don't really have too many of. And then just my highest equity bluff catcher type of hands. And then play very cautiously or specifically on certain runouts like 8x or 3x. Or, so that would be my answer.
Pretty good. Very detailed talk, but everything pretty really good. And yeah, just because, I mean, it was a kind of a long explanation, but this is exactly what we need, right? Just like, it's not about, okay, it's like, it's A, like villain is doing A, so exploit is B. No, there are like lots of different things happening for different range parts, right? So if we think about our weaker range parts, but that have equity against villain's continuing range, those are against exactly those that now make a better c-bet instead of a check, right? Because, well, we face less check raises, so we have like not to bet fold as often, and then our EV of betting obviously increases. But at the other hand, we have hands that actually benefit from villain check raising, right? There are hands like, I could ask people what is the first hand you want to bet big, but actually there's never a hand that wants to bet big. It's just about getting money in the middle, right? And it's about understanding, well, how does it work? Like, how is villain's incentive to put money in the middle? And if we now know that villain's incentive to put money in the middle is high, but he is not doing it, well, we need to do the job ourselves. So actually, first thing I would be doing as well is just like, I bet big with my freaking pocket fives, right? I can bet big with my pocket kings. I'm not like calling his check raises and he is check raising his queen 7 sometimes. It's not happening. So first, that's the assumption. That was, Fedor repeated it, but I hope that was clear, that we just say, okay, they're not check raising enough. It's like maybe slow playing too much, but for sure not having all those kinds of like parts in their check raising range, which has like that 6-7, 5-4, not check raising all the open enders, not check raising most of their gut shots, etc. So now we could go even deeper, which I don't want to do right now, just like putting the idea out there, thinking about turns and rivers, right? Which hands do they have too often now? If they are check raising not enough, probably all their 6-7s and 4-5s are in their check call, right? Which will lead to overfolds on the turn, right? Those hands shouldn't be in there that often. And it tells us to like really make a difference on what the turn card is, right? A turn king, he will never have it, right? And all his gut shots are shit now, snap folds, and all his bottom pairs are snap folds now as well. So actually we could play with a 30% double barrel, just like as an idea for an exploit, or saying, okay, actually in the end, if it's queen 6-5, Fedor even said, so he c-bets ace-10 now, turn is a deuce, river is a deuce, villain is betting. Well, if he still has, like, he should never have 7-8 in his range because it's a check raise, but probably he has it. 7-9, 8-9, 7-4, 7-3. Well, 3-4 got there. But yeah, just there's not like one read and there's one exploit to it. There's just like one fact, and that means different things for different lines and different range parts. So actually we just named probably like 5 different kinds of exploits that can work against that guy. Right? And now versus check raise, we are obviously overfolding the flop now. And we can, like, we will be better at evaluating the turn card. How does it interact with his check raising range? Right? Is it like, or even we can say, I missed that one when continuing on the turn. Well, like there's a 7 or an 8, like, okay, he should actually not hit that too often because all that stuff that hits that is in his check raising range. But now we should like slow down so insanely. Probably he's not playing aggressively enough on the turn as well. So we can still like just bet our kings and aces to then check back. But we should know about it. Well, villain just like improved more than he should in theory. Right, so this is just another key point, just like thinking about, okay, different kinds of exploits. There is not just one. Now coming to the next step. As the check raiser, now Fedor, you're playing against Fedor and you know he is over c-betting. And we can guess that for lots of people. There are lots of people that are seeing queen high, rainbow board, not even thinking about nut equity over time and straight stuff and all that shit. They c-bet 100%. So what's your plan?
I mean, go ham.
Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I would just check raise a ton. And regarding sizing, I mean, I don't really have so deep thoughts on sizing, but I would definitely increase, like basically the list we went through earlier, I would just widen that. I think a really big part, let's say he continues optimally, like oftentimes I struggle with, if someone c-bets too often, then do we assume like an optimal continuing range, or do we also assume how he's continuing versus a check raise?
We assume a human continuing range.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. So most humans, I think, just overfold significantly after they c-bet too much. But there's also some players who play back, where then it gets really tricky, check raising too much with pretty low equity type of hands. But yeah, so I personally, first instinct, just increase check raising frequency significantly.
Yeah, just that was my understanding, right? It's not that this is not our, like that was our baseline, what we looked at, which is like far more aggressive than most of the people out there. So actually, I want to see that as a baseline. It's like, this feels like your 45% open raise on the button, right? If the big blind is always folding, well, we increase that to 60 or even 70%. So this is how I want you to see that check raise as well. If you understand, okay, it would be 19% in that spot. Why not go 25 or even 30 by keeping the structure of your range? Obviously, you will be weaker because to those 100% of sixes you are check raising, you cannot add another 100% of sixes. You just don't have those. So in the end, you will have more gut shots and stuff. But as well, you can take, right, that queen X,
queen jack.
Right, you can take your queen jack suited, backdoor flush draw. You can take some more of your ace queens. You see like those, like the Americans call it always like trace plays, right? When you just like see traces of it in Pio, and it's like already fine. Right? This is why I want you to make that list, not only for high frequency check raising hands, but even do it all the way down to hands that in theory gets check raised 0%. Right? Just like to be open for adjusting in both directions. And I haven't seen a single player where I wanted to adjust in the tighter direction. I haven't seen it so far. And the sizing, exactly. We are like, first, when we think about sizing, it's about which part of villain do we want to attack. And probably he's just check raising, when he's c-betting 100%, he's c-betting way too many weak hands. So we want to attack those weak hands, which is I started with like a very small sizing, pretty much on all those boards. I just use my 50% hotkey. It's kind of keeping my range together. It's like a super great risk reward, and just opens it up for like the turn, because as Fedor said already, the turn will be pretty, let's say, polar, very good for villain or very good for us. There's like, I was looking for a brick on queen 5-6. There is no brick. Okay, now let's continue a little, because I feel like we're behind time, but like important stuff is important, and we need to like talk about that. But I think next is about talking about turn continuations. And I just showed you that. I thought about asking you the question, hey, what would be the best or the worst card? You could probably find it. I think Fedor named the worst card in like when he was talking about, he named like 3 cards. The worst card was obviously in there. And the best card for villain is, well, interesting as well, but kind of obvious if we think about it, right? So, I mean, I don't make you search for it now. The best card is the offsuit 3, right? Where like deuce 4 gets there, 4-7 gets there. Really the nuts, plus all the 2 pairs, plus all that other stuff makes an open ender. And all that even random king 7, ace 7 has a gut shot and still an overcard. The worst card is actually the jack of hearts. Right? Obviously, a king is really bad, an ace is really bad, but the jack, villain makes a set, villain has queen jack off at least partly, and the main thing is why it's better than the king is that, well, we don't have any jack in our check raising range pretty much. On the king, we have some like king 7, we talked about that, and have some king queen, ace queen ourselves. So these are the worst cards, but you see what I meant with polar. There is not a blank where it's like, okay, I don't know, like 10 plus is super great for in position, mainly because out of position doesn't hit a shit, right? All that straight stuff is insanely good for in position. 5 and 6 are kind of the bricks where we need to think about, okay, like our value hands get decreased because obviously when there's another 5, we have less combinations of pocket 5s. But at the other hand, we are improving to, let's say, 5-4 suited, which is trips now, stuff like that. This is why we need those hands as well. If we don't have those in our check raising range, the 5 and the 6 is just really, really, really bad for out of position. And the only kind of blank in between hand is really that 9, where both players have a little 7-8, but mainly in position picks up nut equity with his floated jack 10, king 10, king jack suited type of hands, where he's like still, he has some nut equity going on, even though the 9 is a good card for out of position, bringing some straights there. That's kind of the in-between card. So now I guess it's the next quiz right away. We want to think about turn continuations. And I just gave you exactly those 3 cards. And I want to keep it simple so we stay rainbow. No flush draws out there. And the question is, guess the frequencies in the solver for the following cards. I gave you 3 options. And for overbet, first question before starting that is question to you, Fedor. Why didn't I set a bet size here?
Why didn't you?
What would you set as a bet size for the overbet?
Somewhere between 100 and 150%.
Okay, why?
Good question. Just seems like if I would want to test a solver for different bet sizings he's choosing, I would want to have something that is not too far away from 75% to showcase some kind of indication of how often he's choosing a really big sizing.
Okay.
If he chooses 150% rather often, then I would consider to even bet bigger.
What would you think the solver would choose as an overbet size if we were 300 big blinds deep?
I mean, I think I haven't really thought much about that, but I would think that he would build small pools for each sizing, where it's so low frequency that it becomes really difficult to draw good conclusions from it. Because I think there's definitely a range you can build around 200 or 300% betting size if you have nuts that your opponent doesn't have. Like it's just, there's no reason not to, I feel.
Exactly. So the main point is I just wrote overbet down there because it depends on how deep you are, right? So for like normal stack sizes, and let's say when we say deep and like that whole system of building nut driven check raising ranges, let's start with that like 60 BB plus, right? The whole theory works for like lower stack sizes as well, but then like really different hands can count as nuts, and that makes the whole system a little less appealing. But for that, it's really just deciding that we want to get stacks in, right? And the basic bet size should, like, once we decide 3 of hearts, we have deuce 4, we have 7-4, we have 5-3, we have 6-3, we have those nuts that we check raised on the flop that are still nuts. Villain did not improve at all on that 3. Then we decide now we want to have a sizing that goes direction all in, right? Again, talking about those steps, direction all in. And it's just, okay, we take the same size 2 times and we will be all in. That's kind of the goal. So the overbet size that we want to use in that spot depends on the stack size. And if we take extreme examples, like the one I just gave to Fedor, 300 BB plus, now it's tough. We cannot just take one bet size and play our 7-4 and deuce 4 differently. Or like, because we cannot take our 3-5 as like in that same sizing. Like huge sizing means villain only has to call a few hands. And well, 3-5 against, like, for that stack death is not a value bet on the river anymore for like a 700 BB pot, 600 BB pot, because villain is just calling 6s and queens, let's say. And therefore we need to find that trade-off. But with those stack sizes, overbet means we are pretty much deciding now we are going direction all in. And that is kind of like, we can find the linear sizing for that with like 30% flop c-bet, 50% flop check raise. That's around like 130%, 400 BB stack size. That's the 130, 135 that I'm using in my games, mostly in game. But really, it's not about the overbet. If we only have like less stack behind, it can be actually our 75% can be that line, right? If it's just 2 times 75% to get all in, well, then we'll take that one. And now feel free to go for the quiz and just guess randomly and think about which size to choose. Why? What are like those more or less frequencies? And Fedor, feel free to help the team to maybe just tell them a little how you evaluate those turn cards. How good, I mean, we have seen the EV that obviously the 3 of hearts is good for out of position. The jack of hearts is good for in position. The 9 is kind of in between.
Yeah, so I mean, the first step I'm thinking about is kind of doing the same process on the turn as on the flop, is thinking about, okay, what's the equity distribution, 2 different ranges. Now, the in position player had the chance to kind of select his range, continuing to the check raise on the flop. So his range is definitely more coordinated and stronger on the turn now. So one thing that makes a big difference is how much nuts are being added. And on the 3, as Steffen said and explained, there's a lot of nuts being added. On the jack, there's basically no nuts being added. And on the 9, there is some being added. And so the first things I'm thinking about is, okay, if there's no nuts being added, then we're in a worse spot than we were basically on the flop. So my strategy in this situation would be the easiest thing to think about is, okay, if I have a pretty polarized range between low equity hands, because now there's only one more card to come, that almost never win at showdown, but a lot of them, like 4-7, deuce 4, 3-4, maybe some 5x or 6x, and my still nuts like 6s, 5s, 5-6, queen 6, queen 5, that now got a little worse because he can have jacks, he can have queen jack. My strategy would be similar to my flop strategy, which is very high frequency of check and maybe some mixed over bets between some of the good bluffs and some of the nuts that I still have. But probably most likely checking and then check raising again, because now villains or heroes incentive under the gun would be to deny that equity, right? Because if if we have a lot of open-enders or gut shots that we still have, and he gives us the free card, that's decent for that big part of our range. So this would be the easiest card for me, logically, to think about. The 3 of hearts, I find that shifting in our favor, where we have so many nuts, where I definitely want to have a lot of overbets in my continuing range, which would probably be the majority if I think about the range that I have. I mean, I have 5s and 6s and 4-7 and 6-3, and then also a lot of high equity hands like the ace-4 I check raised. It's not going to be all of it, but it's going to be a pretty high frequency, I feel. So I would say probably not 100, but almost all of it I would personally overbet on the turn on the 3. And if I don't overbet, I would still probably bet on this card. So maybe with the smaller sizing. So I couldn't really think of a hand that I would want to check on the turn, given the equity and not equity advantage I have. So really strongly protected. I want to, although mostly put all my hands in the overbetting range. And then on the 9 of hearts, I would say it's somewhere split in between there, where I want to deploy an overbetting strategy. I want to probably have a checking range, just because my range is not strong enough to be just betting with most of my range. And so I would, I know you put on 30 and 75% there, so it's most likely going to be chosen, but I don't understand, or I cannot really find a logic on like building a range like that. So
okay, so I'll stop you here. And yeah, I guess this time it was 2 minutes, but again, guys, scroll back, listen to it again, because I won't ask you now in the chat for giving all the answers. I'll just show them to you. I was obviously fooling you trolls, but Fedor nailed it. That small sizings is like something I get in my coachings a lot as like the option, because it's like, okay, we check raise queen 5-6, the turn is a jack, but I still want to bet my 8-9 because it has equity, so I bet smaller, which is like very, very wrong. It's just like, well, it's really what Fedor said. It's just about, okay, first thing, we need to evaluate a couple of things seeing that turn card. How does it interact with our range? How does it interact with Willem's range? Will we be talking, or like we are talking about how many nuts did we improve to? And the question, our flop nuts, let's call it nuts, something like 5-6, are they still nuts, right? Where Fedor mentioned all of that, right? On the jack of hearts, we didn't add anything. And the problem is that, for example, our 5-6 just decreased in value. Villain added jacks and villain added queen jack. Not sure whether he has it offsuit that often or not. But same thing for the 9 kind of, right? Villain has like, well, 7-8 just partly, but he has pocket 9s at least, and let's say queen 9 suited. So our 5-6 got worse. Really, it's about the new nuts, but as well, how do our old nuts still perform? And the 3, therefore, is such a special card here, because all our nuts from the flop are still nuts. Villain did not improve to any straight, to any new set, to any 2 pairs, to nothing, right? So our 5-3 is kind of nuts against his aces and kings now, our 4-7, our deuce 4, etc. So Fedor said he wouldn't check anything. Actually, these are like those few queen 10 suited, queen jack suited, ace queen off that are just like now not good enough to go for like for all ins. Those are in a checking range, but that
makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I didn't think about them.
Right. So actually, like once you're facing someone, probably this checking range is missing, and when he's checking, he's probably just checking 4-5, which is just the biggest mistake in the world. Just like not keep betting with those. 6-4, right? Just like it still has plenty of not equity. It's not a freaking mid pair that has some showdown value and open ender to try to get to showdown. No, it's not. So let's think about that again. Like, how do we get to those frequencies and the sizing? So really that kind of a guideline of how to think. How strong are my flop nuts still? First thing, right? Let's take the 3 as an example again. 5-6 still nuts. Queen 6 still nuts. 5 still nuts. 6 is still nuts. That's pretty much it. How many new nuts did I add? Okay, plenty of 2 pairs, an open ender, which I have 100%, plus a gut shot that I have like pretty often because it was a nut gut shot. All got there. Okay, how often will those nuts be value bets for stacks on the river? The straights, 100%, 5-6, 80%, 3-5, 80% when the board does not pair, pretty much. So all pretty strong. Right? And there, I won't go that deep, but something just like, again, to think about is, well, how does a flush draw make it different, right? How does a double flush draw make it different? Right? On a double flush draw, we will, for example, see very, very different sizings because we know on the turn, well, our straights will only be nuts kind of 55% of the time, right? Regarding some blocker effects. And villain will have flushes. Our two pairs, well, it's like, again, kind of a 50-50 thing. So it's really like on the double flush draw board, for example, we use a smaller sizing because we will polarize later, right? We will use a smaller sizing and bet. And then if it's offsuit on the river, we will 2 times bet the pot with our straights that villain can never have. And with our sets, because you should raise them on the turn, etc., etc. But that's getting too complicated for now, would extend the lesson a little. But yeah, that's just ideas to think about. Now thinking about, like, or just saying like, okay, that Queen 6-5 was just a very, very, very extreme example. Now we see like 2 things on the turn, very good or very bad card. We understand, okay, actually the frequency depends on how good the card is, but actually the sizing just depends on which kind of pot do our value hands want to build. And that question is answered the same way, even on the bad cards, right? On the bad cards, let's say that Jack of Hearts, our 6s, our 5s, they don't try to build a smaller pot now. They still want to go all in. It's just a question, do we bet ourselves or do we let villain bet? And that's the trade-off to understand, okay, it's not about the betting. I said it when it was about like betting big on the flop. It's not about the betting. We have certain hands and their only goal is to get money in the middle. I don't care whether I bet myself or villain bets. And this is talking about turn exploits right away. I'm sticking to like betting myself a lot because villain, as Fedor mentioned, has lots of reasons to deny equity. That's right. But they are just not doing it. That's the problem. So in general, I'm overdoing it with the c-betting there a little with my nuts, and my checking range is kind of unprotected. I can tell that if there are not too many cash game players out there that play my stakes. But I will adjust. So yeah, that's really kind of a point. And yeah, another thought is what other stuff can happen, right? First thing I wrote down is both players add some nuts, right? Let's say an offsuit straight gets there. There is a reason why I chose early position versus big blind, because the ranges are like very, very different. Button versus big blind, we'll have like often like both players improve. But obviously 7-4 suited, it's more like a thing that the big blind will have. But then we have at least 7-8 suited, 100% both frequencies. Or let's say once we get to the offsuit part, check raising on 10-8 something and both players have all jack 9s. Well, what happens then? We need to think again about where is our advantage, right? And then it might not be in the nut part anymore. And then we choose a sizing which is not going direction all in, because direction all in just means we are interested in the nut part. Right? Or like something very special when both players add a lot of nuts, right? But we might still want to bet because we are still stronger, but our advantage is not in the flush area. Maybe it is in the straight area, right? Let's say Queen 5-6 with a flush draw, turn is the 3 and the flush gets there. We have our advantage with having 7-4 and with having 4 deuce, but it's not in the nut area. And that leads to downsizing, right? Play around with that a little, right? Just check that out, build your, like, make your lists, check your check raising ranges, build those, and really think about, try to be precise, right? This is why I said that here. By choosing a certain bet size, you choose the range you're playing against, and you want to know what your value is you have against that range. How likely is it that you can value bet? What are you drawing exactly to? So this is pretty much what I just said. Takeaway number 2, know where your advantage is exactly. Is it in the nut area? Are you trying to build pressure villains, kings, aces, and ace queen on Queen 6-5? You know he will hate the river on pretty much any run out. And well, where's our advantage? Which sizing does that dictate us, right? Okay, that example was we're going all in, no smaller bets exist. If there are flushes, well, villain will help you build a pot because he has flushes too. That tells you, okay, your advantage is somewhere else. Maybe you are just trying to get 50 big blinds in the middle, which means forcing villain to only like continue with, let's say, 10 or 20% of his range total. And when your advantage is there, you're making money in the end. Villain's either playing with bad hands or he's overfolding, and both is good for us. So yeah, I guess that's it. Some hand histories. Let's see. Yeah, maybe we'll get to like just read one hand history. What do you think, Fedor? Any additional stuff you want to say? Any questions coming up? That would be the point right here, right now. Maybe I'll kill that presentation for now to read that stuff as well, and you all see all that stuff here.
So one of the things I want to add here is, I mean, first of all, thanks a lot, Steffen, for this part. There's been some super crazy insights in there, for sure, for me as well. And one of the things I want to mention from a tournament perspective is to not, to take this as a Kickstarter of thinking about how much stuff there is out there that you can think about to get better and improve, but not to take this too literally. So this was 100 big blinds deep, very specific opening ranges on a very specific board where it's very extreme. If you look at other ranges, shorter with ante, different positions, different boards, you will see very different results. So not so high check raising frequencies, or not so high overbetting frequencies, and so on. And Steffen mentioned that, but I wanted to highlight that again, because it's really important that you don't go to tournaments now and just blast it off check raising every board and then overbetting turn. But it's just a Kickstarter to think in this way, because if you do, I think you can draw. You could see that even though I didn't know the solution and I don't play much cash game, just by thinking that way, I could somehow pinpoint or go in a somewhat good direction, just by applying the logics that I've learned over the years. So this is what I would highlight from everything I've seen that Steffen just shared, is to not take it too literal.
Yeah, it's really, I would agree there 100%. It's really just like really telling you, okay, this is what you can work on. I don't even want to say like what you should, right? It's like all up to you, right? What you can work on to improve in a certain area, right? I was working on that. That was like my main topic, working on, I have like a monthly topic. That was May. And until now, I feel like, okay, this is my like the spot that I enjoy the most, right? It comes always up, deep cash game, defending big blinds, obviously, but I can even force villains to get into that game tree more often because, well, I will play better there than them. Like no way they put more work in there in that game tree than I did. So just like really, it's that you can work on that different way, like one way of thinking, right? I did the job now for you to like come up with that instead of really digging deep yourself, looking into PioSims and come up with some rules that pretty much always work. So it's kind of that jumpstart that Fedor was just like talking about, and then put the work in, right? And enjoy it, and like, right, enjoy crushing those spots. They are fun, right? It's like, it's about building pots. It's about having fold equity. It's about showing up with deuce five suited on the river. That's what we all like if we are from Brazil, right? So let's go.
Vamos. So let's look at one hand and apply it, I would say.
Okay, winning or losing hand?
I mean, come on, Steffen. Your image
okay.
and losing it.
I make two. Oh, now we see the hands. That was not the plan, but doesn't matter. Okay, so two hands. No, you don't see my screen right now, right?
No, you have to share again.
Even better. So we make this one big. We're just playing a little enjoyable Zoom 500. You see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're defending against 2.5x. That's now middle position, not under the gun, but we don't care. 10-5-4, right? It's not that far away from our queen 6-5. Villain should not always have 4-5. Right? Should not always have this and that. And this is now exactly what I was like talking about before when I said, I know the baseline now. I know that this is maybe a very, very low frequency check raise, but I decide I want to overdo it. I won't like give you a loaded HUD or anything now, but that was my assumption right here, that he is over c-betting that board. He's not having like nuts and like not advantage right now and not advantage over time. His advantage is jacks through to aces, and they are not planning to play for all the stack, right? Maybe he likes to get 3 normal bets in. And it's my job to not let him dictate the pot into that direction. I go either all in or I might fold earlier. So yeah, he c-bets as expected, small sizing on that board, totally fine. I know that is like maybe a little overdoing it, but my 7 as a 2-pair out is clean. My 4 is clean. I have 3 to a straight. Actually, having those pairs are better when you block his 4-5 suited combinations. Just something again to think about, right? It's like not having the backdoor flush draw. Actually, the 4-7 of clubs would be the cool one here, to have the backdoor flush draw and block like one of his nut combos. But yeah, so I'm obviously going ahead, check raising. He calls. Turn is an 8. I mean, guys, it doesn't get much better than that. So what is our check raising range? I could ask you now to write down the list, right? I'll just do the job for you. It's pocket 5s, it's pocket 4s, it's 10-5 suited, where I'm not really sure whether I defended pre. It's 3-6 suited, it's 6-7 suited, it's deuce 3 suited. It's probably the way I played it, 5-8 suited, 4 deuce suited, 4-3 suited, 5-6 suited, 7-5 suited, something like ace 3, ace deuce, ace 6, ace 7 suited with the backdoor. So yeah, we are crushing it here. It's kind of the 3 on our queen 5-6. And this is now, we are not having bottom pair. We are still having kind of a, what is it, a 9-outer to the nuts. Even like I can still almost, I mean, hitting a 7 is not nuts, but like pretty good.
How do you feel about hands like queen jack and jack 9 here?
It's like they're improving in spots where villain improves too. So I'm rather going for those black or white spots where I can really leverage once I hit, right? Queen jack would be more like, if we are shorter, hitting a jack or a queen is like hitting the nuts. But here it's just like, okay, a backdoor to a straight that he has himself is always worse than a backdoor to a straight that he doesn't have. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's exactly, I mean, blockers on the flop are usually not the biggest thing in the world because it's blocking queens and jacks, but it's mainly blocking king, queen, and king jack, and ace jack and ace queen off too. So it's kind of has upsides and downsides, but it's always the main factor on like, okay, am I hitting something that I can value bet on the river? Queen jack, and how good is it? And there I talked about, okay, it's like, yeah, not that good because he has it himself.
What I find really interesting is when you look at these somewhat binary spots, I mean, they come up quite often when it's like, okay, you have maybe a third of the deck that clearly improves one player's range and a third that improves the other player's range. I somewhat find it interesting to take hands that rather improve on the third of his, because I'm definitely going to bluff and have a very high success or like very high equity on bluffing the cards that improve mine. Especially if it doesn't really contain his range, because I feel that also, like, let's say on a 6 or a 7 or a 3 or backdoor clubs, like people are even overfolding versus what they should be calling down.
Yep.
So just something that I find interesting to look into.
Yeah, it's the question, like that's the bluff thing is for sure a thing, and it's like something that I would take it that way, which is super important, that we check raise enough on the flop that we still have bluffs if we get the perfect runouts. Right? It's like this runout, you can fold to everyone in the world. You're just a catcher, right? If you have pocket kings and it's just a catcher, against 99% of the population, we can just easily fold the turn, right? Because they didn't check raise enough to now have plenty of bluffs. But if they just have their 6-3 suited when they defended pre, that's not enough, right? That's a big thing. And then it's obviously good when you have queen jack, but I would say queen jack is just like a little further down on my list. It's still a potential check raise, but I have hands that on the value side improve to better hands and I can make more out of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it's obvious. This is now pretty much that 2E sizing, actually a trick you can do in Pio. Just put 2E in there and Pio does the job for you to calculate the perfect sizing to get all in over 2 streets. I think this, I don't know what I did here. That's what I did manually in game, but yeah. And well, he calls and we obviously get there. But it's just important. Never ever check here. Never ever choose a different sizing. That's the way to go. And thank you, buddy. So now I don't want to show only winners.
That's interesting. Like, what do you think about this call on the river?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. Pio will tell you it's even minus.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Higher usually tells you that everything is 0 EV once you have a catcher, but this has to be a bad one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so basically, I mean, on this stakes, this must be a losing play on against the average, even against the average good reg, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So it's basically because of the ace deuce ace 3 part. I mean, I can see that because it's, but the question is if it's enough on the river. I don't think so.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So okay, L5K. Okay, let's play for some money at least. So 6-8 suited. Here we go. Where again, I prefer check raising those hands. Now I have a problem that he is an unknown to me, or like I think that was an ACR or something. I know the name, but no clue. So I face a half pot bet size. Where actually, this is something that we can take. We talked about exploits as well. Some people, tend to bet bigger with their stronger hands, which then means that we can attack their small betting range even more. Right? Again, something that we should take into account. I decided to just treat his half pot as kind of a normal small C bet. It's fine to bet bigger on that board. And I prefer that one here a little over all that king 10, queen 10 type of stuff. Well, queen 10 is an open ender. I prefer that obviously, but it's again, hitting a straight where he doesn't have a better straight. 10-8 suited, I don't really think so. And obviously I would prefer, I mean, not really 8. Yeah, I mean 8-7 has again the double gutter. But 6-7 would be shit. So this one is a pretty cool one. And again, thinking about what are we actually drawing to? Something like 5-4 is really, really, really good check raise here. Something like 5-6, clearly worse. Okay, so I'm check raising, he calls. Turn is a 6 now.
Vamos.
And yeah, I have 7-8. Obviously I have, 5-6, I don't have it. But okay, shit. And yeah, obviously this is a good one to continue with. Against the button, my 6 might be worth something and we start checking at some point. But it's really, what are we drawing to? And here, again, just like it's not about the overbet size. I don't want to bet 150% here because he bets half pot on the flop. I need to adjust my sizing to get like all in with pot pretty much here. That's what I'm doing here. And that jack, what I'm doing here is I'm bluffing my set blockers I have from the flop, pretty much my 5x. Or like having heart would be cool. And my 6x, I'm actually giving up. Maybe he's scared of bluffing his queen 10. So no way I'm folding. No way I'm bluffing here, this one. That 6 is not a set blocker. He never has 6s. So yeah. So really thinking a little about that as well. Okay, just like 2 hands kind of applied, taking the aggressive route where, obviously I found hands where they called me, but there's like, it's pretty insane how much fold equity you create. And like, then even I guess the most EV for me right now comes out of the continuation play, because just like looking deeper into that game tree, it tells you, okay, what should villain do? And you understand what villains are doing wrong, especially when they take the check raise and then overbet line themselves. You understand what they should have and where they probably are just like super bluff heavy. And yeah, let's wrap it up with those 2 hands.
Awesome.
Maybe Fedor having some last words, maybe one more question. Feel free to ask. And yeah, I'll just.
Yeah, I mean, this was super insightful. I mean, I can say so. I learned a ton in this session right now. Also inspired me for some other things I want to look into. I mean, no anti-cash game is not necessarily what I'll focus on, but it's for sure interesting. And to me, it just showed me again how many spots there are that you can look into and learn something from. And the part I like the most personally is to have your own like inbuilt Pio solver, basically, where you can see if you apply smart logics, you will get very similar solutions than what Pio is suggesting, because in the end, it's nothing. It's nothing magical. It's just trying to find the best equilibrium or the best strategy for 2 ranges. And I think getting better at that, that's the thing that's fascinating me. So yeah, thanks a lot, Steffen, for this insane session and value and sharing that with us. So I think everyone watching and who will watch it in the future will have their brains fuming after the session. So yeah, I appreciate it a lot.
So, and now I'm off to my favorite pizza place and you guys all jump in the Sunday grind?
Exactly.
So good luck, everyone, and I'll take that as the last words. Yeah, crush it. I want to see some titles in that Slack celebration channel. Okay.
Will do.
And then you'll all be back next Sunday. We'll talk about. We can tell them, right? Is it out there that we're talking about some blind versus blind, some more small, boring stuff.
To everyone, next Sunday Steffen's going to be on again, so it's just going to get hotter. I'm really looking forward to that because blind versus blind is something that happens so often, and applying that in real life. So everyone out there, I wish you all good luck in the grind today. If you're playing, I'm definitely going to be in the streets battling the guys in the high stakes. Yeah, I wish you all the best. Crush it, win some trophies, and post in the Rail thread and success channels if you win something, if you run deep. Give others the chance to enjoy your success, especially Steffen. He wants to see the tournament wins. He loves it.
That's it.
Guys, wonderful spending some time with you. Have a wonderful Sunday, and keep crushing. See you next Sunday. Bye-bye.
Bye.